Hello, and welcome to this freemium episode as we head into the holiday season here on We Together. We are releasing this to show a bit of what we do over on our Patreon, as well as give our team some time to spend with their loved ones heading into the new year. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this week on We Together, Sci-Fi or Fantasy. What's going on, all my nerds, geeks, and tabletop freaks, and welcome to We², the companion podcast to the We Together tabletop gaming extravaganza. I am your GM, Sebman, and today I am here with some of my players. Say hi, players.
What's up, playa?
Hi, players.
That is Charles and Jerry, members and participants / players of the We Together extravaganza I mentioned earlier. And today, we're going to be talking about something that we all kind of have been musing about. And I said, shut up, shut up, shut up. That's content. We will record this.
Juicy content.
Juicy content. Cyberpunk / sci-fi, whatever you want to call it. Because I hesitate to call us full cyberpunk now. It kind of leans a little bit more sci-fi. Or fantasy. We've all played and have varying level of experience in both of these realms. So today we're just going to talk about and discuss those differences, how it feels to play, how it feels to run, how it feels to create a character for each of these worlds. And luckily, I have two players who play in a sci-fi world with me and have characters in that world. So I just want to kind of throw it to you guys. When you guys were creating your characters, when you guys were coming to the understanding, okay, we're playing in a sci-fi world, okay, it's different than a fantasy world. How did you approach creating a character and backstory and such? Whoever wants to take.
Well, me and our gracious GM, while streaming, would
Praise.
make jokes and talk about our player creation, Jebediah, now known as Jebediah, because I wanted to just be a space bear and just be Peter Quill, but in bear form.
Kind of hard to be Peter Quill with bows. Possible, though.
Possible. So,
now I'm cooking.
So not only the addition of guns, because fantasy tends to lean away from traditional firearms. They're there with your artificers and there's some other homebrew classes out there that bring guns into fantasy settings. You don't really see a lot of that. So getting to just like pew 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 at people is kind of like my goal. Just being a sharpshooter. But like that goal has somewhat changed since we've even existed in the cyberpunk, the sci-fi world that we're in now.
Right.
Avoiding the spoilers, but Jebediah has almost turned into a whole different character than the ranger that he is now, which is wild to think that he is even a ranger.
For sure. I genuinely feel like that's true because of the sci-fi. Like, I feel like once you start, in the beginning, when you came up with the character and you're like, I want to be Peter Quill, I want to be Space Bear, which is the only reason we have bears, Ursars, in the entire thing. You had started out being like, I want to be this gunslinger space pirate. And then it turned into more of, I want to use what's around me. I want to use the pieces, like technology. I want to use the fact that your characters have general knowledge. Like, that's the difference in a fantasy setting. Unless, like you said, you have your artificers, but not everyone around you has some basic form of general knowledge of technology. And your character picked up this habit of just kind of being like, okay, I have a gun, sure, but how can I take all of this scrap technology around me and turn it into something that moves my character forward, something that moves my story forward? In a fantasy setting, that seems almost very pigeonholed to a artificer. I play an artificer in a fantasy setting. It is very pigeonholed. Like when you want to create a new magic or a new technology, when you want to create a new thing, you don't have the basic. You can't go up to someone and be like, "Hey, help me create this thing." You are usually the arbiter of the technology you make in the fantasy setting. Like nobody else knows what the fuck you're doing.
Yeah,
and I
you
feel
like something so basic as a revolver in a fantasy setting, and you have like kingdoms coming for you. Like
right,
build these in mass for our armies.
The implication of that in your character's backstory, in your character creation, I'm the only one who knows what a firearm is. As a GM, I immediately go, "Oh, do you use this in public?" Do people know the implication versus Jebediah being more of a scrappy tech person in the sci-fi world? People aren't looking at his tech going, "Oh yeah, like that's fucking cutting edge. That's new." People look at his shit and they're like, "What the does that even work?" Right? So like it takes the edge off the technology. It makes technology more normalized, which allows your characters to be a little bit more immersed in just basic technological understanding. Like the fact that our guns don't even have really reloadable bullets. They use synthesizers to synthesize their bullets on command. You know what I mean? Like just the fact that that all exists lets you be like, okay, I want to be a Peter Quill. I want to be a gunslinger, but I also don't want to be the only Peter Quill. I don't want to be the only gunslinger. Like I am a part of this setting that is normal. It is a normalized thing to have a space pirate gunslinger. It is a normalized thing to have all this technology, which is why it's funny that I have you two here today specifically, because while Jebediah comes from that technological is everything is good, or sorry, technology, everything is normal with technology. When we were creating your character, Charles, there was almost a task to be had of like, you were like, I want to have technological basic know-how, but I also don't want to know too much about technology. I'm from a place where we don't really use it as much. And I was like, wait a second.
Yeah, I'm playing a weirdo. Yeah, I'm playing like an Amish guy in like a sci-fi world.
Which is almost the antithesis of what I said with the artificer in a fantasy world, where you're like, you're the arbiter of all technology, basically.
Which
when you're
I find hilarious. I've got like a decade plus of like TTRPGs, and a vast majority of that is spent in fantasy. And like generally in my life, I didn't grow up with sci-fi. I grew up in fantasy land. Everything I read, everything I've watched, like all of my friends, it was like knights, dragons, and it was only in recent years really that I even explored the genre of sci-fi. And I come from an especially interesting place because I also really helped facilitate a lot of the creation of this world and really personally dug into the technology, like ironically. Like in my character in what we call Campaign 0, we're currently playing Campaign 1, was in a lot of ways the arbiter of this world's technology.
Literally.
And that was my first time ever playing a character like that, which is funny because I play artificers as a whole pretty regularly. That's kind of been
favorite
my thing.
class.
So I've always played the standout like technology guy. I've always played the guy who has something that, you know, nobody else has it. He's a genius in some capacity. And I did the same thing with the previous campaign's character. I made a guy who stood out even inside of cyberpunk as a technological genius. A few things happened, and next thing I know, I'm being intermingled with fantasy. I basically like was dual classed, started as an artificer and like dual classed a druid in a way. So there was this really weird juxtaposition that I had to play out with the character where like fantasy was introduced into this person who is like very technologically based. And then for me as the player, it's the reverse of what I typically do, which is I am fantasy based and I play a technological character. A lot of fun. You fast forward now, I guess thousands of years in the future of that same universe. And I'm playing a character who is eschewing technology. So I'm playing from I'm in some ways my current character Leo is playing closer to my capacity, like my desire inside this world.
Right, like a fantasy mind inside of a sci-fi world. You
100%.
literally use a bow and arrow in a sci-fi world.
Yeah.
Jerry, look at Jerry's face. He's like, what?
Spoilers. I barely do that, but I do. Yes. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, honestly, because in my opinion, I think the biggest thing, character creation aside, is what this does, almost this juxtaposition of roles, is it allows me to role play against the world at large, which I think informs not only my role playing, but my story and how I interact with my fellow players and the NPCs. I think it makes it more enticing for me. And it leans into my style of play, which is almost being the butt of the joke. And a lot of that's the wrong way to say it, but I really want to lean into that. This guy's different in some capacity, and let that be a big part of my persona. And so far, I highly recommend you listen to our campaign 1. So far, it has worked out both hilariously and tragically in more ways than I could say.
Jerry, did you have something you want to say?
I'm just disgusted at his use of bow and arrow in our.
Again,
it makes me.
I think I've used it once. If it makes you feel better.
Can I just say, it is kind of funny. First of all, for those listening, for this first point that we're talking about creating characters and backstory, what I've kind of discerned is fantasy cyberpunk. You will always find a way to do the thing that you like doing. You will always find a way to be the person you want to be. So if you're playing a cyberpunk campaign or playing a fantasy campaign, you want to be playing the opposite, you can still make it work in either of those worlds with your character by doing smart character building.
I think that you can do that. Yes. I will say now playing in sci-fi aesthetic, the breadth of things that you are capable of in character creation and then playing forward from that in sci-fi is tremendously larger than anything you can accomplish in fantasy. And that's not a bad thing. I like the simplicity of fantasy is its appeal for a lot of people, myself included. And, because in sci-fi, you can play everything from fantasy through sci-fi. Nothing's stopping you from being a knight in armor on the streets, except for people thinking you're weird. But you can even look cool doing that. You can have badass cyberpunk samurai armor and look cool with a sword in sci-fi.
Look at half of the League of Legends roster. I mean,
yeah. I mean, as somebody who just watched Arcane, I think that's a pretty solid example of fantasy sitting very comfortably inside of sci-fi.
Of sci-fi.
I mean, I think we have to really just give credit where credit's due to the original. I mean, I would say the original fantasy and sci-fi. Maybe not the original, but the original for me, Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Definitely not the original, but I see what you're saying.
Very culturally relevant to this, yes.
Probably one of the biggest inspirations, at least in my mind, for the way that I feel about technology and fantasy being melded together, because I think that's really what we do.
Yeah.
Here, more than anything, is meld the two.
Yeah, because I think it's important for us to note that in our world, magic exists. And in fact, we are heavily magically influenced inside of our world. So we are exploring techno magic to a large degree, which is, again, I think goes back to what I was saying about the full, range that you're capable of within sci-fi versus what you can do with fantasy. Because if you introduce cybernetics to fantasy, there's a whole layer of things to get to that point that you have to justify.
Yeah. And I think actually kind of from your earlier point with when you were talking about how your character now is almost eschews technology versus your character before, where you were in a fantasy setting or a fantasy was kind of thrust upon that character. And in the fantasy setting, when you're playing the artificer, when you do the different thing, you're the genius that invented something. In a sci-fi world, when you eschew, when you reject technology, you're the dumbass.
Yeah.
Like nobody looks at you like you are a genius. And I think that that's ultimately where I'm coming to a conclusion here, at least when it comes to creating characters and world building as a whole. There's always going to be a little bit of both in either.
I was just going to speak on the point that Charles was moving on to, it seemed, with the techno magic and technology. Because while it's explored heavily in our campaign, we'll keep it at that. I think that that's something that could be explored even more by other mediums. I think that like techno magic is very unique. Like Artificer is a very, very D&D
right
class or like archetype, so to speak.
There is a huge spectrum too of like, well, we are juxtapositioning fantasy versus sci-fi, but what we should be really doing is like, okay, this is spectrum, and like they sit on two separate sides of the same spectrum. When you talk about technological magic or techno magic, or what we call it magitech, you're looking at this now. Okay, let's say we did have a fantasy world that used magic for everything. That's how I like my fantasy worlds. Magic is how you turn your shower on. Did they have showers in medieval fucking Europe? No, they did not. In my fantasy setting, it may be a medieval town, but they still walk into a shower stall, wave their hand, you see some water runes start fucking spitting out water. That's how they take their shower. In a sense, that is magitech. That is magical technology existing in a fantasy way. It just is now skewed way more heavily to a fantasy setting. It can exist more realistically. If you had plumbing in a fantasy setting, that would be like some artificer shit where people are like, your poop goes where? There isn't a magic portal for your poop to disappear in. Like that. It is.
Why are you talking about poop?
Why are you talking about poop? Because in every setting,
It's
fantasy
relevant.
or sci-fi, it is relevant. Where does the poop go? It is relevant. But I think that when you consider technology and magic fusing, that's what makes your class selection. And you know, obviously some systems use their own classes and they use their own. We used D&D classes in a very heavily futuristic sci-fi capacity. And
brewed out of their fucking minds.
Out of their fucking, not traditional subclasses. I said traditional classes, not subclasses. We made our own version.
If somebody saw what our characters are right now, they would go, what class is that?
Shush. But I guess that kind of is the answer of what I'm trying to say. Whereas like, it was really hard to be like, all right, man, you're a sorcerer. And sorcerers are cool, but a level 1 sorcerer versus a guy with a gun.
Yeah. And that's that going back to that range of capacity inside of sci-fi, like you also have the range of difficulty exponentially grow because the BBEG in sci-fi versus the one in fantasy are a different beast. This one has a giant laser gun that will kill everybody. And
is that a Death Star?
This one raises like an army of the dead. Like one does sound really scary, but it has nothing on the giant laser that can destroy planets.
I mean, there's magic that can destroy planets. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, you're not wrong.
Well, on that same point, it's like, because I was talking to one of our other players earlier. I was talking to Bishop. I was like, the reason that the classes are so interesting is because we can cheat.
Yes.
It's
Explain
it's
that, because people are like, what the fuck?
it's
You're
much
cheating?
not literally. We have not just our classes, but we have not just the ability to learn abilities from other classes through whether it be a type of document that we can find on the internet, because you have the internet in a world that is connected, that like you
That's
could
it.
learn.
This is actually a great point that I had not considered in my argument.
You could literally learn another, like you could be two different classes at the same time because you looked up a YouTube video on how to become a
crazy.
sorcerer 101.
Even more prevalent than that, if we're talking like really digging into sci-fi, you can just get like a memory implant that just teaches you kung fu.
Well, and
Yeah.
that's where I was
I know
moving
kung
to
fu.
that point, was
Yeah.
that not only do you have the internet, but you have cybernetics and technology that you can have implanted in you that can teach you new skills such as food,
Well, yeah.
such as like driving.
And the argument of fantasy, though, they have this exists. It's like knowledge, like magic books that like
Yeah.
empower you with magic.
But the thing that I think that is kind of, because you resist doing this in a fantasy world. Like if you're GMing a fantasy campaign, you resist because it takes away what makes the characters unique to some degree. If a fucking wizard can learn how to rage from a magic tome, right? Like, but in a cyberpunk / sci-fi setting, it almost makes sense that classes would become homogenous because you have this ability to go, okay, yes, maybe I am a sorcerer and I can do magic, and that's been my thing for so long. But I want to become strong enough to fight in melee combat and it be a viable thing.
Or even way cooler is I'm going to be a sorcerer, but from like a tank.
From like a tank, right? Someone could just fucking cut your arms off and give you stronger arms. You could just buy a tank. You can just buy a tank. Like you can just do that if you know what I mean. And it's really cool because Danny, one of her characters, was a sorcerer in a tank, and one of my favorite things that she would do is have someone firing the tank forward, and then out the back cast fireball. so you have a tank that is like using the technology, but then also the fantasy element kind of coming in and being on top of that. And I think that that's what the strong argument here is. Layering, if you are a ranger and Jebediah is a big bear and you wanted to get a neural chip that allows you once a day to get all of the benefits of a barbarian who rages, it is way more pliable and less like you're stepping on the other barbarian's toes, because now there's a world building metric for how this thing works. And it's not weird or out of character. And you guys are both raging and we're doing some cool anime ass shit. And it all makes sense. There's no break of immersion for anybody while this is happening versus like, really guys, the wizard found a scroll and now he can fucking be resistant to all bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing damage. Like what the fuck is going on, dude?
Skyrim.
It happened in Skyrim.
That's how I build my entire kit, is what's in Skyrim.
What's in Skyrim? Skyrim has been the bane of so many GMs.
Literally, dude.
Same with like Baldur's Gate. I'm guilty of this, but coming in with Baldur's Gate knowledge and being like, I cast guidance every 5 seconds has made my GMs very. But
the tank sorcerer thing, that was just like an aside. I had no idea that you guys had done that. And on that note, actually, because I came in late enough to this group, I also missed the era in which you were playing a fantasy setting, and then you I think cross dimension hopped into cyberpunk with those characters, which is fascinating. And I need to know at least a tiny bit more on camera here.
Because Jerry wasn't there either. Technically, Jerry joined during this. Basically, short version, the characters themselves were inhabited by vessels, which are just the players. That's just my word for the players. And those vessels had a calling or a destiny that stretched longer than just the lifetime that they were given. And everybody was confused all campaign. They were like, what the fuck does that mean? Are we immortal? What's happening? But really what happened is at the end, due to the BBEG at the end actually turned into a good guy the last second and was like, there is a calamity coming and I needed you guys to be strong enough to fight it. And now you need to go and fight it. And everyone was like, okay. And then I ended the campaign with them waking up on asphalt, getting picked up by a car. And they were like, what the fuck? Their characters were so fish out of water. We drove into Central City for the first time. I described skyscrapers to someone as if someone who had never seen something like a skyscraper would have seen it for the first time. And it really led into this overall, just like the characters themselves. I watched each of the players go, this is a new chapter. Like everything I thought I could do, everything I thought I was capable of just expanded on a level that is really unknowable to them at the time. And we did a time skip after this. So I think fucking 10 years or some shit. I don't remember. It might have been 1 year. It might have been 10 years past. And they all had now lived 10 years of life in a cyberpunk city as a fucking fantasy party. And that was one of the coolest ways to show this juxtaposition, is how some characters seamlessly entered into this world and were like, yes, oh yeah, I'm gonna, like, our bard was like, I'm gonna get things that help me seduce people way better now. Like, I could use the internet, I could stream, can I seduce everyone all at once using this? So into it. And then there was the wizard in our party who was literally like, all my magic is now a app or a fucking machine. Like, everything I could do is no longer special or I had to learn it. And I think it really was such a cool thing to play it out in real time. And then when your characters joined and you joined into the world, your characters were even more better suited for the world that we created because you guys came into that world. You're from that world. I think it was a really cool.
God damn, I miss Rain. I miss Rain so much.
Hey, man, maybe I have always said that every campaign we just go when I say go to a different setting, I just mean we tell a different story. There's an argument that we stay in this sci-fi setting. There's an argument that we go back to fucking campaign 0
Central
setting.
City.
There's an argument for all of it, right?
Say we do the reverse. I say we go from sci-fi to fantasy. Like, your characters go from sci-fi to fantasy. Actually, I was going to say, I think it'd be really fun to play out as a campaign the gap, the time skip that you did, the 10 years of just getting your feet under you, figuring out what the fuck is happening. It'd be so much funnier. It'd be so much funnier in reverse. You go back, technology doesn't work anymore. Unless you have cybernetics, maybe we figure that out. But one way or the other, you go back and you're like, have to figure out how to live, like, way dumbed down. So it'd be kind of funny, like, if we did it with our current characters, because like Lei would just fit in finally.
Not to spoil anything. So spoilers, minor spoilers. You guys technically already did it and are going to already do it again with the game girl.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? That's on the board. The only problem I see as a GM running a session like or a campaign like that. So you are Leo, and you are luckily Charles is a great team player, and when his character is the butt of the joke, he handles it very well. He enjoys playing the character that way. When all of you go back to a fantasy world and let's say, no more plumbing or, fucking no more no more food synthesizing. You got to go hunt
Where
for
does
your
the
food.
poop go?
You guys are going to essentially, if we play that 10-year gap, the reason why I did a 10-year gap was to allow for understanding to kind of skip that awkwardness. It would be great for like 3 sessions. And then you guys would get really fucking sick of every NPC going, "You're not from around here, are you?" Like, you guys, like, I promise you that would get really old really fucking fast.
Honestly, I don't feel like Jeb would have a hard time fitting in either.
No.
I think Jeb would. I think Jeb would, because first of all, if we were to, just for example, say go back into the fantasy setting we had created, Ursar didn't exist. Second, I think that you, Jebediah, would have a better time fitting in only if you embraced the bear side of your nature, which is an internal struggle between Jebediah, because he, like as he says himself, "Oh man."
Fair,
So,
but also, I genuinely feel like at least the Ranger side of Jeb still
Ranger
shows
does play.
himself a lot, and so like I feel like Jeb, at least when it comes to like his jobs, like the things that he does in the world outside of the campaign, like being a bramblebush dealer or doing bounty hunting, are the same things that I would probably be doing in a fantasy setting. So I feel like Jeb as a whole would probably adjust very easily. It would probably take a pretty big adjustment period, though, for Jeb to be comfortable.
The
thought of Bramblebush dealer and fantasy is really funny, actually.
Gandalf.
Yeah,
what do you mean?
Was he a dealer?
Fun fact, Bramblebush is from the fantasy setting. It has been around for nigh on 5,000 years in our actual canon.
I played a proper like D&D campaign, actually right before I joined you guys, where we incidentally, as like a side project, it kind of happened organically. We were smoking and we saw this guy growing, and like one thing led to another, and we started a small
mute your mic.
Bramblebush. Okay.
Talking to Jerry.
We started a small Bramblebush empire.
Brother, I mean, Jerry's trying to do that now in the campaign that we're in.
It's way easier to do when nobody else smokes.
Yes,
you know.
True.
But in
right
this
now,
game, where everybody is high all the time, a little harder.
And honestly, that's another. I mean, you would have to go up against people who sell it. Like, I feel like what he's saying is, if you're the only Bramblebush seller, it's probably a lot easier than if you're trying to go up against Paulie B and his entire drug network in the sci-fi setting, trying to sell Bramblebush. Which, by the way, for the layman's, that's pipe weed. That's the ganja. That's the good stuff. But
Hobbit,
of course,
the Hobbit leaf.
The Hobbit leaf. Well, of course, we don't call it weed in session for obvious reasons. But
what? It's weed? I had no idea.
I'm just looking at this list. We kind of hit magic, classes, technology. So I'm thinking one big one that everyone who thinks about fantasy versus sci-fi points out as the big red flag, the big omega problem that most people would have going from one to the other. Combat. Obviously, things fundamentally change when you have guns that are normalized. And in my game, it's like, okay, I could just say every gun does the same thing and we could just move on. But in a sci-fi world, that's not true. You got submachine guns, you got large machine guns, you got sniper rifles, you got revolvers, you got pistols. They all do different things. There has to be some form of having a plethora, just like with a long sword and a short sword in fantasy, right? They're different. A pistol, the difference between a pistol and a sniper rifle, I would argue, is a little bit more than, let's say, a longbow and a short sword. You know what I mean? Like the difference in damage, the difference in application. Like if you have a sniper rifle, what's the range on that shit? You know, like the longest range in D&D is like what 600 feet, maybe. If you have like crazy, if you string a bunch of stuff together,
yeah, a sci-fi sniper rifle, like could it be infinite range? Like you just need the right combination of like a bullet that like can fucking heat seek and like fly on its own would just obliterate all range entirely. A drone. You just put goggles on and you just fly a drone into somebody. Yeah, you're not doing that in fantasy.
No, I mean,
I want to do that.
Figure it out. You can figure it out. You can find a winged kobold or something.
I was about to say,
winged kobold.
Can't you like control animals, like get them to do things for you, and you see through their eyes with
the ethics change quite considerably in the difference. Just
hey, Bunny, carry this bomb. I'm gonna run you over to this guy.
Didn't you guys do that to Leah at one point while she was a hamster? Anyway,
I think so. Yeah.
Oh wait, Leah the hamster as a drug mule kind of goes hard because she like can get into somewhere and then transform back into her halfling self with a bag full of drugs.
Because a hamster doesn't have a belly button, could we like duct tape
don't
some
weird
weed
start
to the belly button, and then like she'd turn into a hamster. She'd be all hamster like, and there wouldn't be weed.
Well,
then
technically, you could just duct tape it to her whole body because when a druid turns into it, it takes its clothing.
Yeah, what does the belly button have to do with this? Like if she had a bag, of weed,
away from the prison pocket. You know, I was trying to do a more PG, more PG-13.
Have you ever seen her? She holds things and then transforms into a hamster, and those things disappear. Where do you think those go? Actually, do not answer that. Shall we move on?
Yeah, we don't need to reiterate that.
Danny, the moderator saying nature's pocket, the belly button is just
that is so false. That is so false. Anyway, so when it comes to the applications of combat, there's a lot of systems out there. There's a ton. There's so many systems for guns, so many systems. We use in Hapless, we use the modern manual. Like there's a lot of different systems. In our system, we kind of just like normalize guns to the point where every gun is its own. You know, some guns shoot more, and some guns shoot less. Some guns do more damage. Some guns jam. And it's kind of created this zone of like, okay, you got your magic users who use magic. You got your gun users who use guns. You have Charles's character who uses a bow and explosives.
Explosives, boom.
How do you handle this combat? And I will say this. It is very difficult. I would say it's the most difficult thing I had to do when switching. Going from, okay, you take 1d8 damage from your longsword to, okay, realistically, I could say you take 1d8 damage from that sniper rifle shot. But let's think about this here. Are you wearing armor? Do most people just wear armor, like walking down the street? No. Honestly, the ACs in a cyberpunk world, unless you have like augments that increase that, everyone's AC is like 13 or 12 because they don't wear any armor.
Like wearing a nice jacket.
And if you take a 308 round to the chest and you're not wearing any armor.
Let's not get it twisted. If you're wearing plate armor, you take a 308 to the chest, you're also having a really bad time.
That's a fact.
So
if you take a 308 in any condition at all to your person, you're having a really bad time.
I think that's one of the things that we had to adjust the most coming over to Cyberpunk, because we're playing more with the side of AC, the dexterity side of AC, because when you fire a bullet at someone, it is like a couple inch, if it's a big one, of something very small, a couple inches that you need to dodge, that you need to move out of the way. We see all the time images of people shooting guns at other people and missing a fuck ton. because the difficulty of wielding a sword, arguably, I would say it's not very arguable, but some people would argue with me. The difficulty of wielding a sword for the average layman, and the difficulty of aiming and operating a gun, especially when you talk like assault rifles and sniper rifles and things, you have to actually like have technical know-how to really use them. The ceiling goes way up, and I think that a lot of people don't consider that. Most of my bad guys, especially the grunts, are using a pistol. And if they are in the range of the person, they're going to use a melee weapon. Like they don't want to pull that pistol out and try and use it because they're probably going to miss. And guess what? In a world where everyone has guns, if you pull out your gun, odds are somebody else is going to pull out their gun too.
Yeah, it's kind of a signal like, oh, we're using guns now.
Oh, well then, let's use guns.
Well, don't mind if I do.
Allow me to pull out my pocket pistol.
Oh my God.
I thought this was a knife fight. I do think that an interesting thing came from it, at least in our court, in having switched from fantasy over to sci-fi, is that because the scale changed and because the ridiculousness of everything goes way up, like you have to think of it less realistically.
Yeah.
By nature, that is like how TTRPGs tend to lean. I mean, you have like your Call of Cthulhu's, like where you take a bullet and you just fucking die. But when you're talking about like fantasy, even in medieval fantasy, like you can't really take a sword hit, but in fantasy, sure, you can take a sword hit. So same thing when you fast forward into the future in sci-fi, like bullets, you just kind of have to do less. And what we did with that is we went, mechanics are pretty lame whenever you justify them in like a it's like fantasy style. Like we could take a bullet, right? Like we could take a 308 bullet to the leg and should walk it off by tomorrow. So I like what we did with it, where we kind of like vacuumed out all of the like excess fluff of like damage rolls and like kind of like fluff mechanics, and we kind of went all in on the more like cinematic aspect of combat, taking out a lot of those like, okay, on your turn you do this thing and then this thing and then this thing, and making it more like action, and everybody kind of like goes through and does something really cool with like their economy and like all of their kit. It's so much, it fits so much better into fantasy to lean into like the anime like cinema style, as opposed to I do think in fantasy the more traditional mechanics do work well because it's more like sensical in a lot of ways
and easier to picture, because in our minds,
huge, yeah.
In our minds, when you're in a gunfight, you see people running, chaos, pew, 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 ricochet, ricochet. When you have a sword fight, and you have two people sword fight, it's his move, counter, his move, counter, his move. There's a little bit more of a realism effect.
Well, and I think another good point there is that we have a realism effect in our game where if you get shot, if you lose a limb, you have to replace it. You don't just, unless you know a healing magic that lets you grow a limb back, right? We have to
rare in our world for lack of need of it.
Mm-hmm. Right, because we have cybernetics. We have arms that are better than your arms. I have an arm with an MP3 player built into it. What do you mean? Why would I want my silly little flesh arm back? Right? So I think that, but like having those consequences in this style of world is what brings about the innovation.
You know what, bro? You just segued into something beautiful that we didn't even put on our list. That is a huge difference, a massive difference. And I mean, it could be argued that it's not that different, but I'm arguing for it being different. Money. The quantities and the things in which you can spend it on are, and the availability of, you can go online and order something from a guy that is on the other side of the continent Versus in fantasy, it's like, oh, I want to go buy a magic item from Lathander. Oh, I guess I have to start traveling there. It's 2 weeks, my horse. You know what I mean? Just versus being like, yo, I'm going to stop by the shop and pick up my augments. I'm wiring you the cash. And so having money and having the accessibility to all of this stuff makes funds and raising funds and having funds. We've already talked about one of our players trying to sell drugs. We talked about other ones of our players trying to fucking kill things.
Sell their body on the internet.
Sell their, pimp out their AI that they saved from a weird bathhouse. Whatever it is, they are trying to come up with all of these very intricate ways because money. I've played fantasy campaigns where the only person who gave a fuck about the money was like the rogue, who like their whole thing was I steal money. It's like, okay, cool. You have the money, whatever. But for the most part, you're like, okay, I can find cool items. I can find cool items, out in a dungeon. I can find them, doing quests. In a fantasy world, if you find in a sci-fi world, if you find someone's augment, their fucking arm just sitting on the ground, yeah, you could take it. Probably not a good idea. Selling it, much better idea.
Maybe we did that. Maybe we didn't do that already.
Maybe we did. But you see what I'm saying? It changes the whole scope of how players view their opportunities. I feel like money mean like you're just more money hungry in the sci-fi world because it is a more money run world.
Well, I think what's really cool from like your seat as the GM too is you can use currency as you very much do, much to our chagrin, as the like limit factor in growth, because money is like way more integral to the sci-fi experience than it is in fantasy. Like in fantasy, like you need to upgrade things and get better things as time goes on, but like in sci-fi, because the difficulty ramps up so much more, you almost are forced to seek out like these bigger items to like substantially grow. And if you are a good GM, you can see that the opportunity there to, instead of having those like kind of like weird kind of leveling guidelines that you have in a more traditional game, you can instead use money as like the growth factor. Like how much will I give them? How much will I allot them? And as well as making the cost of things go up or down. Yeah. And then that can help determine, do they get that cybernetic that leaps them, way above everybody else in like their same kind of like level group.
And I feel like we get into that in our campaign by virtue of meeting different people that have access to different things. And I feel like it's so easy in a fantasy campaign to be like, oh, this is the potions dealer. Where in a cyberpunk campaign, it's like, okay, you got your guy that deals in stims. You got your guy that deals in drugs. You got your guy that can literally heal you using god powers. Or you got your guy that, for enough money, he can make it so that you will never have that problem at all. You can just replace that part of your body. You just replace that thing. It's such a weird juxtaposition to put, where like if you took a wizard from fantasy, threw him into cyberpunk, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, my eyesight's not what it used to be. And some guy's like, hey, I know a guy. If you want, I know a guy. Wait, if you want good eye, like, do you want like top shelf? I know a different guy. But if you want, if you just depending on how much money you got, if you just want to, I know a different guy.
Yeah.
I know a guy.
And the feeling of like I know a guy in sci-fi feels so much different than I know a guy in fantasy. Mm-hmm. In fantasy, it feels much less like shady. And it's like, I know a guy. He's in the winter college, on the hill over that way. Where and like sci-fi, like cyberpunk, you're like, is it the guy in the corner? I walked past him earlier. I'm like 90% positive that's your guy, and I do not want him if that's your guy.
It's Bloopy Dooper in the corner. Hey, you want some eyeballs? I got some eyeballs for you.
Yeah.
So actually, to segue into the last thing, because I feel like we covered combat. Like, again, guys, we're not doing specifics. If you guys want to hear us jump into specifics, this is a free square. This is a freemium episode that we're releasing to everyone, but we do release more, I would say, pointed to our campaign and to our characters content over on our Patreon. So go ahead, head over to our link tree on all of our socials, head over to our Discord to come talk to us, but also come on over to our Patreon. You can hear us talk about these things a little bit more in depth. But
I mean, given that we are literally doing an entire like episode going into this hyper niche nerdy thing, if you're into this, I just cannot tell you enough how much I personally want you to come to our Discord and ask me anything about this. I just, and we're hella nerds. We want to talk about this with people who are interested. So come on over. Our Discord's pretty sick. A lot of cool people.
Nerd call. We're putting out the nerd signal, which I don't really want to think about what that looks like. But we're putting
honestly,
out the nerd signal.
It could just be the Batman symbble, and it would work.
Everyone would understand. Yeah, we'll just use the Batman. If Batman shows up, The last thing I kind of wanted to go into just on this, because we're talking about money, and this actually is a huge, I would say, one of the more cliche differences. Transportation. Why these homies got a horse? I mean, you got like teleportation circles and stuff, but that's all considered so rare most of the time. Whereas in a cyberpunk sci-fi universe with just 20 units, roughly $2,000, you can buy a car that will last you until what level are you guys now? Level 4? It'll last you a whole year of campaign just in driving around in the same car.
Upgrading the same car even.
Yeah, travel time is so insignificant. I mean, it's not completely insignificant, but it really has forced us in our game, if you listen to us, to play minute by minute. Like, because you guys can so instantly be somewhere else. You can so instantly be like, I want to go on the other side of the freaking world. And there are ways to do that in a timely fashion. You could, in the same day, do that if you wanted to, or if you had the money.
You could say the same thing about, like, I mean, this would work in either or. We can also explore teleportation, which we don't personally do, like much of, but they would exist in both realms.
I've talked to so many GMs, bro, and you guys yourself are GMs in your own right. How comfortable are you in your fantasy settings just having teleportation be a thing that happens?
It has to be, like, the cost of it has to be such a deterrence that it is something that you have to, like, it has to be a whole arc for you to be able to get to a teleportation, not having the capacity to teleport.
I am the exact opposite. I just started a campaign pretty recently. They're level 1 and they're in a fantasy world. They have rock phones. And when they finish their first big bad boss, they're coming up on their first boss fight here soon, there's going to be a return app pop up on their rock phone. And they're going to be dragged back to the first city they were in. And they're not going to know what the fuck happened.
When you say rock phone, how comparable to what I'm picturing a phone being?
So it's a rock with a magic crystal embedded in the front of it.
That's what I was hoping you were going to say, and not like a rock in the shape of an iPhone.
Oh, it is in the shape of an iPhone.
Okay, never mind. I take everything good I said back.
but it's a crystal. It's a magic crystal. That's why it's different. But
to be fair, though,
hate transportation in a fantasy world.
It depends. It's situation. But
there are some players that really love it.
Well, even outside of the players, consider from the point of view of you being the GM, don't you want the opportunity for pirates to attack them when they're on a ship?
That's the thing.
That is always so cool.
Well, they're only going to be able to teleport to places they've been. First of all, together.
That's actually cool.
It's like a fast
It's
travel.
literally
almost.
fast travel. Skyrim ruined. No, I'm just kidding.
But to that chagrin, if they need to go somewhere and like they need supplies, they need things, like they have to go somewhere, number one, that they've never been, or number two, if they're returning from somewhere they've never been, they may have found something on the way there that they want to stop and go back to.
Right.
But they can't necessarily get to that place because they didn't go there. So they can go back to like where they were on the trail and then begin that adventure from that point.
That's kind of my overall point here is like, even with, some teleportation in your game, you still are imposing that fantasy setting overall. Like, you have to go, you have to travel, you have to prepare. Versus in our game right now, in our sci-fi setting, if you guys wanted to take a road trip, let's say to the other side of the city, you guys would need to prepare dick, because there's several fast food restaurants you could stop along the way. There's several, you would just hop in the car and you guys are on your way to the thing.
We do it every session.
Every session. And when I attack you with pirates, which I still do, even when you're traveling, right? It's in traffic. Like, everyone around. I feel like in a fantasy setting, even when you have these niche ways of teleporting and magic, not everyone around you has access to that. Whereas like the transportation evolution of a sci-fi world is everyone. You can drive from one side of the city to the other. So can the BBEG. So can the guys you're running away from. So can literally everybody who has a vehicle.
Yeah, and I would argue too, like the BBEG he's probably just teleporting. And like we don't know that he's teleporting, but he can totally just teleport. Like we know Seb.
Yeah.
Like we're driving a literal clunker in a sci-fi world, and there, like the thing is there's a lot of people driving high-end aerial vehicles. So
oh yeah.
But again, on the end of fantasy though, like mounts exist and they're arguably way cooler. Like riding a dragon is so much cooler than a flying car.
You're so wrong. You're so wrong.
Okay,
hop in a fucking Gundam. Don't talk to me.
Tell that to
right now. You're so wrong.
You're a dragon, bro? Riding a dragon? No, way cooler. Dragon Gundam. Okay, fine. We'll agree to disagree, and we'll stop it at Dragon Gundam.
no, but I hear what you're saying. I like, honestly, like both. It's the only reason mounts have always bothered me is it's a living fucking thing, and not always.
Depends on if you summon.
Yeah, right. But like, it always is like, even if you summoned it, like how comfortable. I know that there's some psychos out there that use Yoshi to get a free double jump, but like. I'm immersed, right? How comfortable are you, Jeb, throwing Toke into a pit of death so that you can travel?
If it was like
an
ethereal summon, sure.
But
he's he's a real G. Why would you do that?
Yeah, I was about to say I'm not doing that to Toke.
How common is an ethereal mountain? You know what I mean? Like for the most part, what I've seen in a fantasy world, you have horses. You have sometimes, people who are crazy and ride around on boars and bears and shit.
Well, but like magic. I mean, there is the occasional magic like summon.
Keyword occasional.
Well,
and that's kind of
here's the issue, and everybody listening knows this all too well. If you play TTRPGs, the issue at large is all the cool stuff in fantasy is at the far into the campaign, and we all know we're never making it past a year. No matter how hard we fucking try. Getting a bunch of adults together to get to level 20, yeah, right.
Yeah, never, ever happened in my life. I've played a lot of D&D. Never in my life has that happened.
We'll do it. We'll make the difference.
Well, I capped this at level 12, so there's a chance. there's a real chance that we could make it to max.
But can we also talk about how like silly / maybe ? Cool would be to have a mount in a sci-fi world? Like cars going by, you're just on a tiger, just booking it down the highway.
And here's like one step further in that vein. Biological brain, cybernetic body.
Like
creatures. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like Zoids, but with a tiger brain.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Oh,
what I
brother.
think it's
Okay.
Oh, brother. Oh, I know what
I'm in.
Toke's becoming.
Oh,
You,
dude.
you were just saying you wouldn't fuck over Toke, dude.
We're going to
You trigger out
disintegrate
so
your body,
fast.
Toke.
I'm not gonna fuck over Toke. I'm gonna make him better. I'm gonna
It's so
improve him.
sick, bro. You're sick.
But hey, this wouldn't happen without a cyberpunk world. So we have that to thank. We have that to
I can't
thank.
even tell if we're making an argument for or against it at this point.
My favorite character in anime is Show Tucker. Just kidding. That's a joke.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know him.
get the reference,
If you've never watched Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, you know. If you
know,
watch
you
it.
know. If you know, you know.
So I just triggered so many people on accident. Anyway, let's wrap this up because I feel like the final point could be a little bit of a hunker. And we've talked a lot about things in fantasy, things in sci-fi, and I really feel like the consensus that we've kind of come to in a lot of ways is you can really have your cake and eat it too in either world. Sci-fi just lends itself to making things a little bit, and from what I've heard from this conversation, a little bit easier to explain and have more wide of a variety of world building and character building and possibilities, both in combat, both in travel. And I'm not saying it's better or worse than fantasy, but what I'd like to take this time to do now, generally, we'll go one by one here. What do you guys think? Pros and cons of a fantasy world, pros and cons of a cybernetic world. Start with Charles.
I mean, I had a thought on this as well as a kind of like a wrap up thought in that a lot of this is just aesthetic, because
Yeah.
you can really accomplish all of the above in either setting with varying degrees of difficulty or, realism, or like you might have to justify some things in one versus the other. But ultimately it comes down to in a lot of ways, like how open you and your table and your GM is to making exceptions or just like, playing rule of cool or however that shakes out. Just being open-minded to new ideas inside of your game. A lot of it, again, it's just it's an aesthetic preference almost. Like you can have your, super low density fantasy world with like kind of softer magic and softer combats. You can have your high density urban environments with like these like kind of like crazy cinematic experiences. I think it really just comes down to how you prefer to sit down at the table and hang out with your friends. Now, if I were to get into any pros and cons, I would say pros of sci-fi is your range is theoretically unlimited in terms of like what you can accomplish inside of that world. Like I said, we've said that about both, but for sci-fi, you don't have to justify it. It like just fits the bill, generally speaking. And I think that as far as like character development stuff goes, I think sci-fi lends itself to much cooler options with cybernetics or like brain implants or, like designer drug usage. Again, you can make arguments on the fantasy side. Like you can use potions, you can use artificer accessories, so on and so forth. And yes, but again, I think you're in sci-fi, you walk down the street and you're tripping over people selling designer drugs. Where I think it's more of like I said before with the teleportation thing, like I think you have to make like a whole like arc out of exploring the option. So I think the pro for fantasy is I think you're slowing down significantly and you're taking the world in much more than the like details. And I think exploration is like more in my opinion, it's always been more interesting in fantasy. I think it's just more in my element, and I like more aesthetically in my element. That is, I mean, like take like the like almost classic like TTRPG trope of the second you touch a ship, you're getting attacked by somebody.
Somebody,
you know? Or you're doing the attacking.
Coveted. I mean, like you have something coveted by having a ship. Not everybody has a ship. Just by the virtue of having a ship, you are now being like, I have a beacon for like rob me, and please. Like
a sailing ship is like so cool. Like,
yeah, dude,
it's just cool. Like that's my pro for Fantasy World. Like, I think so many elements of it are just really cool aesthetically, and I think that's really my pros versus my cons.
Living in the past.
All right, Jerry, go ahead.
No, I think that there are pros and cons to both. I think some of the pros of being in a sci-fi world are just the rule of cool, man. I think that sci-fi has a lot less limitations than a fantasy world. Fantasy is very cool. And when it comes to and like we stated earlier, when it comes to the worlds as a whole, it's more of a spectrum because you can blend fantasy and technology and sci-fi and fantasy very well. I mean, hell, fantasy is just the second half of sci-fi.
Yeah. Yeah.
Science fiction, right? So I think that some of the pros is it's easier to get immersed in a sci-fi world because you can almost imagine if our world had a major leap in technology right now.
Right.
We're on the cusp of becoming sci-fi. We're already past sci-fi from like 1920. You know?
Yeah. Like if you look at 80s movies that are like, oh, the 2000s, and they show what 2000s look like. Yeah, we don't have flying cars, but did they ever think that we'd be able to transfer terabytes of data across lines that are on the bottom of the ocean?
Like,
no clue, bro.
No, and so it's interesting to be able to step into that element, but also there is something whimsical about stepping into a fantasy world, and that is, to Charles's quote, a little bit softer, a little bit more cozy, you know.
Yeah. Well, cozy.
Not all fantasy worlds are soft and cozy.
I think is the real sticking word, and by virtue of slowing down, it does tend to feel cozy, and that's actually perfectly leads to my number one pro about fantasy. And if someone were to ask me if I prefer fantasy or sci-fi, like just overall, in the way I like to play and the way I like to tell my stories, lean fantasy, because there's an aspect of it that forces connection between the players and the characters that you're role-playing at. Where I feel like sci-fi, one of the cons for me, is because everything moves so fast, because you can just get in a car and turn on the radio and crank it up, because you can do these things, you lose some of that, which my personal favorite thing, camping, taking a long rest, being able to go, hey, I want to talk to my like around the fire. You can still do that in a cyberpunk world, but just in like the same way that you have to force a lot of things to make sense in a fantasy world, in a cyberpunk world, you almost have to force slowing down. You almost have to force taking a minute and actually getting into the minutia. And you guys play in two different groups. So a Friday group obviously doesn't have as much of a problem with this because you guys will literally pull over in a parking lot and talk for an entire session. But I feel like one of the things with Sunday group, you guys are so acclimated to this digital cyberpunk world that sometimes you guys don't even feel the need to talk to each other in role play. Everything that you need to say could be said in a text. Everything that you want to do could be said in a look because everything's moving so fast. That pro for fantasy for me is that forcing to slow down, that forcing to have a meal together, that forcing to sit around a fire, and who's standing on guard, because we know we getting robbed. we know that one of us needs to stay awake, and then we'll do shifts for the long rest because we know one of us is getting robbed. The pro for sci-fi for me has always been the ingenuity of it. We've kind of talked about this, you guys both touched on it for your pro, but nothing beats to me going to a player and going, hey, yeah, you're a ranger. Yeah, you're a ranger. You technically, but you don't have to be. You can be damn near whatever you want. Don't know the spell Fireball? Can I introduce you to a bazooka? Don't know the spell Silence? Can I introduce you to some technology that nullifies sound? You have this ability to shape yourself. Again, with my second pro for Cyberpunk, the importance of money. I found in so many campaigns, money either becomes an annoying thing. People are like, ugh, our GM is forcing us to count our gold. Ugh, he's charging us for our oatmeal at the tavern. Or, there are GMs who are like, yeah, I got gold. Okay, I can stay at the tavern. I don't really fuck. You know what I mean? Like, I don't really care. In a cyberpunk world, you can't not care. Money is too powerful just because of all the possibilities that I just talked about. All of those things are within range when you have money. And I really love in the cyberpunk world how it forces my players to think about, okay, how do I make money? It forces you guys to get creative and really make connections in the city and with things like you got going on with your gangs. And yes, I did just use gangs plural because, you give them a little bit of money, they're going to start collecting and starting a revolution or some shit. But, it is the pro for me that it gives you guys that agency. Because as a GM, there have been multiple times this Cyberpunk campaign where you guys are like, oh, I got money. I'm going to fill this character flaw completely. And it's just going to go away because I have money to buy a fucking cybernetic or a cyber chip that's going to fix that. Jebediah having a 0 driving modifier for the first literally half of the campaign and still somehow managing to roll nat 20 is one of my favorite things about it being in a cyberpunk campaign where it's like, you could have fixed that. You could have fixed that. You could have, but you were too broke. And that's my pros and cons of fantasy.
To add to the currency part of that, I do think that maybe it's not even the currency, actually. I'll take that back. I think that on the topic of fantasy being slower, I don't necessarily think that I feel sci-fi being faster, though it probably is. I think of it just as more, it's bigger. For example, I think that in fantasy, you are most of the time interacting with your bubble of people, your guild, your party, the occasional tavern keeper, and a few other things. Where in every cyberpunk sci-fi level campaign I've seen, or been a part of, I guess, it's always seems like you are interacting at such a larger scale. Even if you're playing a more space oriented campaign, you're operating ships and interacting with fleets and larger groups, entities. With ours, we're interacting with big players and then large groups of people that we don't interact with the individuals. We just know that there's a large group of people that we are interacting with. I definitely think that sci-fi lends to you making more world-changing movements than fantasy does.
I agree with that wholly. I think that's why I said sci-fi is faster, because when you think about in a fantasy setting and you have this character that your party knows and they have all this knowledge on magical items, right? But you guys are in a dungeon thousands of miles away with this magical item. And it's like, okay, let's stow it in our backpack until we can go back to that place to talk to that guy. Whereas in the cyberpunk world, it's, wow, this item. Beep, boop, 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 boop. Hey, hey, Johnny, magic item. Can you tell us what the fuck this? Hold on, I'm sending a picture. Hold on. You know what I mean? Like, it just, by the nature of that, just speeds things up so much that there is no need to go back to that guy. There's no need to travel and to do that. You guys are I would say, sci-fi makes the characters inherently more selfish, just in the sense of, like, you don't need people as much. You can rely on yourself a lot more. And if you do need to rely on other people, they're just a phone call away. If you can't get a hold of them, somebody on, what do we call it? Edit. Somebody on Edit has made a sub edit trying to, do the same thing that you're doing.
Yeah. I think faster. I think you're right. It is, and going back to like the pro and con thought on this, that's just by choice. Do you like a faster, more like robust, large scale campaign, or do you want something kind of a little bit more finite, something that you can kind of pace through together? So it comes down to like aesthetic, pacing. Like, instead of pros and cons, I think we're talking about like your own, like how you like to play. And that's not to say that you can't have the fantasy aesthetic with a faster paced campaign. I actually played a really cool Lord of the Rings campaign where we went into it at a kind of higher scale, and we're leading an army to Dol Guldur. Like we're making like kind of these bigger movements. So it's totally possible to flip this script on these. I think, I guess what we're getting at is more traditionally these lend themselves towards these elements.
And if you're not as it's muted, if you're not as in touch, like as a GM or as a player, if you're not as in touch with what you like, or you're just getting started, or I think it's really important as a GM to be like, okay, it doesn't necessarily matter the setting. Do I, as a player, want things to move quickly? Do I want to push the pace? Or do I want things to kind of slow down and be a little bit more immersive? And then when you're a GM, it is just, and this is just my opinion, easier to push the pace in a sci-fi setting. It's easier to do, which I think a lot of combat-focused players who are like, I just want combat. I would say sci-fi setting, more suited to your needs, because combat can be handled quicker and with less complication. If you're a player that really digs your role-playing, really digs your getting into that party aesthetic, it's not that you can't do it in a sci-fi. It's just that if you don't have your legs under you and you're not good at being able to go, okay, this is how my character is going to slow things down, or this is how my character is going to push the pace. The setting can help you a lot in those regards. So if you're like, I'm here to role play and I like role play, and then you get into a group and it's like, okay, I have a gun that does 65 or 64 piercing damage unless I, cock it this specific way that maybe it's not the table for you.
In that same accord, because I feel like this is back on the pros and cons thing, getting into character. Because I think it's a pro to get into character, like that's an easier pro for the sci-fi. But I also think that it's what you were just saying, literally what you were just saying. In my first ever campaign, I played a Dragonborn. He was a gold Dragonborn, but he looked like a copper Dragonborn because of the Statue of Liberty effect.
Oh, nice.
Because he didn't take showers because he hated his dad.
Gross. That's such a crazy string of events to lead up to he hated his dad.
He
Unexpected.
hated his dad because he killed his mom, but it was not actually what happened. But
tragic backstory, applicable in either
Tragic
sci-fi
backstory.
or fantasy.
exactly,
I've never
the
heard of a tragic backstory before.
And so, the differences between getting into characters like getting into Jebediah or getting into that past character that I was playing, having those moments where you get to experience the world in the littlest moments and you're in that character, I think that's the biggest pro for both fantasy and sci-fi, are those little moments where you're like, yeah, because I don't shower, my scales are brown, they're green.
In a fantasy
Even.
setting, people are like, oh yeah, I shower once a week, so it's not that. In a sci-fi setting, it's like, bro, you don't shower? What's do you not have access to a shower? There's the Y down the street. You can just go down the street. They'll let you shower if you really.
My man said the Y down the street, brother. We had a Y down the street, and I did take showers there, brother.
Yes, me too, bro. And that's ultimately, I think we can end it. This freemium, free squared, brought to you by us here at We Together, with saying that obviously we did a juxtaposition so that we had a conversation about it. But even through the conversation, we really did kind of find the answer that always comes up in these TTRPG conversations. It is almost always the true answer. Play what you like. Do what you like. Try things, because you never know what you might like.
And do it together.
All right.
And it's all just same, but different.
same, but different. Yeah, bloopy doopy. Sorry, I can't wait to play that character again. So, I'm going to end this free squared here, my gentlemen, the way that I always end one of these. And I will simply say, good game.
Caca!
Great gravy.
Wait, was that a fantasy good game or a sci-fi good game? Thank you for listening to We Together. Find all of our links on our Linktree or join our amazing Discord community at We Together Gaming to chat about the story, share your thoughts, and hang out with the cast and GM. If you'd like to support us, please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/We Together Gaming. You'll get exclusive access to our behind-the-scenes podcast, where we talk about our favorite moments, dive into character work, and have long-form discussions about the story every week. If you're all caught up and looking for more, check out the actual play podcast Hapless Heroes, now in its second season, featuring me, your GM, as a player. Available on all streaming services. A quick thank you to our top-tier patrons. GxLobes, BrenDaniel, aka Naturally Noted, That Guy Jake, and my Momma. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, stay adventurous, and remember, whatever we do it better together.